Are you all ready for some fresh air? Jupiter, the planet of expansion and opportunity, enters the brainy sign of Gemini on May 25th. Let's get into it. When Jupiter changes signs, it's always a big deal because it typically only happens once a year. So we usually only see Jupiter spend about a year in any given zodiac sign. And that change is happening right here, right now on May 25th. Jupiter is going to enter the air sign of Gemini, where it's going to hang out until June 9th of 2025. So we're going to see Jupiter hold a magnifying glass to all kinds of Gemini topics, such as media, social media, transportation and delivery, technology, education, language, what can be taught, what can be posted on social media. And it's also going to bring like a whole new opportunity to look at things from multiple different lenses. And I think a lot about what happened in 2020 when we had eclipses going on in Gemini, when we had 2020, that what a year, right? There was like the high opinionated element of like the eclipse is also happening in Sag, but the Gemini invite was like, hey, there's different ways that we could look at something. Let's learn some more. Let's get some more information. And I think Jupiter is going to do that too. Jupiter is a planet that wants to elevate, to bring opportunity, to bring blessings, to bring abundance. And the thing is, though, is that Jupiter is actually in detriment in Gemini. So it does struggle a little bit to kind of give this whole overarching perspective or philosophy on something. In Gemini, it's challenged to see lots of different points of view. So Jupiter kind of struggles to adopt like a singular unifying dogma to help kind of like guide us through. Instead, Jupiter has to keep up with all the changing news, all the changing data, information, and also the like he said, she said, whataboutism that is going to be thriving and raging during Jupiter in Gemini. So, on one hand, we have Jupiter is a benefic planet. Jupiter wants to bring opportunities, elevate. Technology is going to be a huge one in that immediate ingress chart. Jupiter is going to form a trine with Pluto, and that is going to kind of cement in this transit that happens pretty quickly, but it's going to just accelerate technological opportunity and growth. And I think about Jupiter's time in Gemini and how it is an exact prequel to Uranus's 7-year stint in Gemini, which will begin just 1 month after Jupiter exits Gemini next summer. So it's really a prequel to this whole new technological era. So there's going to be a lot of experimentation that's happening in the curious, youthful sign of Gemini. Like, let's try this, let's try that. And I think we're going to see a lot of acceleration in terms of transportation, obviously, communications, games, and entertainment. That'll be a fun one. And television. Because one of the things I'm thinking about here is like there's a really strong television thread with Jupiter and Gemini, and how there's just like too many streaming options right now. And like it was good when we all got away from cable, it was so expensive. But now, depending on how many platforms you're subscribed to, it's like up there now. So I think it's going to be like a big there's going to be a big moment for television this year. By the way, I have a 2-hour Jupiter and Gemini webinar available on my website where we go into detail breaking down the symbolism. We explore in depth the ingress chart of Jupiter's ingress into Gemini. We contrast that with the Aries ingress of 2024. And we also go through 120 years worth of Jupiter and Gemini examples. So if you want like a deeper dive into this, head on over to my website and you can purchase and download that webinar. But anyhow, big technological advances is something that we're going to see, and lots of kind of like fun experimentation, which is going to take us into the Uranus and Gemini era. A hugely defining piece of this year-long transit is going to be the Saturn Pisces square that Jupiter. So while Jupiter is benefic and wants opportunities and say like, hey, I have this idea for education, I have this idea for technology, Saturn in Pisces is going to be challenging Jupiter tremendously. So on one hand, Saturn is going to be kind of keeping in check some of the ridiculousness of Jupiter and Gemini, because Jupiter and Gemini rules things like propaganda and just wild news stories. And like that's something that, especially like here where I am in the United States, as we head into an election year, it's going to be very difficult to discern where the truth is with Jupiter and Gemini. Just again, with the rapidly changing sets of data, perspectives on things. And also, you can take the same set of data and tell a completely different story with it in either direction. Like Gemini is trickster energy. And taken to a next level, it's like the thief, the swindler. So we're going to have to be mindful of that. And I think Saturn in Pisces is going to have its work set out for it as it tries to crack down on where the ridiculousness is and where like the BS is. Because that's something that Saturn absolutely does not tolerate is like, oh, that's a lie. We can't have any of that. The other thing where I think it's going to get a little dicey though is that like something big that's coming up right now is like what you can and can't say on the internet and how this connects to the First Amendment and how like different political parties are trying to advocate to the larger social media platforms around, oh well that's false and you can't say that, but they each have kind of their own version of the truth. And so that's where like Jupiter and Gemini is like is going to create all these different alternate realities and perspectives. And Saturn, like I said, is going to be trying to sift through a lot of that. Now, luckily, we're not going to see a big square to Neptune in Pisces. So that's going to eliminate some of it. But I think also going the other way, Jupiter and Gemini, the inventiveness that it has is going to help Saturn and Pisces come up with solutions. Because Saturn and Pisces, as we know, there's like a lot of um challenges that Saturn and Pisces is trying to figure out, such as the healthcare system and the abysmal failure that it is, especially like for nurses and things like that. I think Jupiter and Gemini might not only add to the problems and accentuate them, but also kind of draw more attention to this and maybe even try to find some solutions. The same thing goes with school teachers and education. Saturn is going to be cracking down on professors, people who run the schools, and we're already seeing that right now. As I'm recording this right now, in New York City, there was like an entire staff walkout at Columbia University in protest of genocide that's happening in Gaza right now. So it's all very devastating, but there's going to be the heaviness of Saturn and Pisces and just what do we do with this? It's absolutely devastating. Saturn and Pisces is showing us our humanity. And Jupiter and Gemini is kind of saying like we need to draw more attention to this and what can be done. And a lot of that is probably going to continue to happen through universities, through schools. I think we're also going to see that Jupiter Saturn square show up in things that are already ongoing, like what can be taught in schools, what can be printed, what books are certain people allowed to read, who can access the internet anonymously. That's another big theme that's going on right now. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of attempts to control media, social media, everything that's going on with TikTok. Um, but yeah, I mean that Jupiter Saturn theme is going to be so strong. Also thinking about like priests, rabbis, spiritual figures, that square is going to put a lot of pressure and try to like hold people accountable for certain things. But again, Jupiter and Gemini is always like, there's different perspectives, and we need to try to understand these different perspectives. And Saturn is going to try to sort through it all and try to make it make sense. But it's definitely got its work cut out for it. So, yeah, being on social media, I think, is going to be a little bit more overwhelming. Perhaps that Saturn square can help us manage our time in these spaces. Uh, but yeah, so that's a little bit about Jupiter and Gemini. It's going to be a really exciting time. It's going to invite us to open our minds. It's going to invite us to see things from different points of view. But that can also be really challenging and really overwhelming when we're trying to gather a sense of what's happening, where we stand. So that's a little bit about Jupiter and Gemini. If you want a deeper dive into these topics and you want to see some chart examples and you want to see some historical examples, again, head on over to my website where you can get that 2-hour Jupiter and Gemini presentation. And for right now, that is your Jupiter and Gemini astrology shot of the day. We will definitely be talking more about this transit in the coming year. But for right now, that's what I got. And thanks for tuning in with me. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in with me today. For more astrology in your world, you can connect with me on all platforms at Astro Catherine. You can also head on over to my website, catherineurban.com, where you can book your next astrology reading. We'll go into depth into your natal chart, your progressions, your perfections, your solar return, your transits, and beyond. You can also join my mailing list where you can stay up to date with me on new classes as well as article drops. I look forward to connecting with you, and I'll see you next time.